All right, now that we've played with the blur filters to see what is possible, and that it's not very possible to get focus back, though we can get some interesting art effects, now we are going to try to use not just the blur and sharpening filters, but any filters you want within Photoshop to turn your original out of focus exposure, like this, into something even more interesting. So visually, I think this is more interesting than this. And that was using a sharpening filter. It didn't bring it into focus, but it brought out some of the colors. It kind of invented these edges and gave me little circles and spheres of groupings that I think are nice. Now I can make a duplicate of that, and now I'm going to just go crazy with filters. And I can go to the filter gallery if I want, which is like a playground. And let's fit in view so I can see my picture. And each of these is a different filtering option. And these are off limits to us in photography in general, because this is a programmer with Adobe, figuring out something that would look cool. But it's not really an artistic choice on our end. It's just applying these different algorithms. And it's not something you can do in a dark room in the same way. So it's outside of the vocabulary of photography. But in the new versions of Photoshop, they make these pretty customizable. So if I use the colored pencil filter, I can adjust with these sliders for each tool how much pressure, how much width, how much brightness I want it to have, and see if that's something I'm interested in. And this is just a preview window. I can try film grain. And sometimes these don't feel like they relate much to their titles. Remember, I did this on a duplicate layer, so I can play with it. This is called Paint Daubs. And this does even a little bit more what the sharpen filter did. Kind of groups everything together. If I zoom in, it starts to look quite pretty. Even more like stained glass or kind of broken fractals. Really clearly contained shapes. Let's try what a wide, what's a sparkle brush? Ooh, I've never tried that. Ooh. Now, the reason I like to have you play with this is because everything in Photoshop is based on the pixels that you feed to it, right? And based on those pixels, you can push them in all these different directions. Ooh, a Sumi ink filter. That's interesting. Now this is definitely in the realm of digital imaging instead of strict photography. But it's just amazing to see how powerful these filters are. So if I take that Sumi ink filter, for instance, and apply it, or if I make another duplicate, you can do multiple attempts. And I actually really liked that Paint Daubs one. I don't know if I'd ever used that before. Fit it all on screen. Fit in view. I think that looks quite nice. So I might say okay. Now underneath each of these, there it is, lots and lots of options. Some of the more extreme ones, like glowing edges. Turn it into kind of a rave party. And then plastic wrap. I'm gonna find where that is. I love that one. There it is. If you do plastic wrap, it makes it look like it's all out of like pressed wax. And for some reason, this one I just find really affecting. It just really, really, of all the filters, this one always just surprises me in how believable it looks as a photograph texture. I use a little too much in this example, but I paint with wax and pigment. It's called encaustic painting. And this is exactly what it looks like when you melt wax into, or melt pigment into wax and try to push it around. So I'm gonna save one like that, one layer like that. Then I'll make another duplicate. I'll save one that is the paint daubs that I liked. And I saved one that was the Sumi ink. So all those variations, which are outside the realm of photography, were taken from just my out of focus exposure. And now to make them better, I start treating them like photography again. So I can first play with the double exposure of them. So what if I mix these two together using opacity? So layering those two exposures together will bring out the color a little bit more, but still have some of that texture. That texture gets softened and not so overpowering. Or I could use something like an overlay filter or a blending mode. But that seems, well, that's really pretty. But when you get right down to the pixels, it's a little choppy. So I think just normal will be more even. And then, do I want any of this Sumi layer in there? Maybe I'll softly overlay that in. Gives me a little bit more contrast. Right. And then, of course, let's crop it to where we find it most interesting. And I've just made kind of a photographic painting. I'm not interested in the content. I'm interested in just the form. So it started with an out of focus, an intentionally out of focus exposure. Then I play with it until I get something I think is even more interesting than what I had before. And I'll save that as exercise 3 experiment. As a PSD to the desktop, in case I ever want to go back and kind of see. And if I'm really being systematic, I might label each layer with the filter that I used. So Sumi was there. This one was the plastic wrap. Yeah, you can do mosaic, you can do stained glass. All those look kind of cheesy to me compared to the plastic wrap, which just has this authenticity to it, though it doesn't really look like it's wrapped in plastic. All right, and then this one was paint daubs. And if you are a clever photographer, fine art photographer especially, you can find ways to bring this into your practice and still make it function in the vocabulary of photography. So that people look at it and see it as a photograph, not an amalgamation of all of these processed filters. But in this class, the only filter we'll use routinely is blur. And then this was sharpen. We won't use sharpen or smart sharpen in this class because it's generally not a good idea to try to bring focus back. It just distorts the image and makes it more digitally noisy. Though there are some techniques that do it better than others, like HDR toning or adaptive sharpening. We're going to try to get as much of that focus in our exposures as we can. Okay, so once we've saved these, just for ourselves, now we're going to save them as JPEGs. And we're going to especially save the one that we've played with. And if we wanted to, here I'm going to flatten all of them onto one layer at the top by holding down Option, going to Layer, and saying Merge Visible. So now it's all on one layer at the top, and that allows me to adjust things that we usually do at the beginning. Things like the levels. And I want it to look kind of like a Kandinsky painting. And the color balance, or the saturation. We take out some of the yellow of that background. Not too much though. All right, so if we like that, now we are going to say save as a JPEG as soon as it's done saving my PSD. And this is our experimental one to the desktop. And then we are going to upload 3 images. And this will be our first time uploading 3 images into PhotoBucket, but it's good practice because we're also going to need to do that for assignment 3. So here is my experimental one. That's one of the ones I'm going to upload. Here is my out of focus exposure. So this will be another one that I upload. And here's my in focused exposure. Now these are also the first raw exposures that we are uploading to PhotoBucket. You know, without any processing whatsoever. So I go to our course, I go to links, I go to PhotoBucket, I log in. But if I do it with Firefox, it will remember me in this lab. And remember, you can log in and upload from anywhere. You don't need to do this from the lab. You can do it from any computer with an internet connection. I go to library. I go to exercises. This will be our final exercise. Click on intentional focus. There we go. So the intentional focus album, we click to upload, and now I just upload these 3. And you'll kind of see the progression, where it can sometimes be more interesting and more artistic to take focus away from what you're shooting than to always just go for documentary focus. Now that's not all. I'm not finished. I need to label them, right? And because we're uploading 3, we want them to load in the right order. So I label them with my first name and then just a number. So this is number 1, the in focus exposure. Number 2 is the out of focus exposure. Those are just both raw exposures. And then number 3 with your name is your experimental, where you pushed it even further in Photoshop. Okay, I'll come around and help you guys upload those, and then you'll be done with your 3rd exercise and get credit for it.